and welcome everybody. Thank you for tuning in. In this video, we're going to share valuable tips on enhancing your relationship-based fundraising strategies to boost donor engagement at your nonprofit. I'm Rob Hoshaw, the Senior Grant Writer at the National Council of Nonprofits, and I am thrilled to be joined today by Allison Fine, President of Every.org, who is going to talk about the Relational Fundraising Playbook. Allison, welcome, and thanks so much for being here. Before we jump in, would you mind introducing yourself and sharing just a bit about Every.org?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Rob. I really appreciate the invitation. I've spent my entire career in the nonprofit sector, particularly at the intersection of digital tech and social good. I've written 4 books on that topic. The last was The Smart Nonprofit with Beth Cantor about the use of AI for good. And a little over 2 years ago, I joined Every.org as president because it's the most phenomenal online fundraising platform I've ever seen. So we're a nonprofit and we enable every nonprofit out there to accept any kind of payment method: crypto, stock, DAF, mobile, Venmo, credit cards, of course. Um, Both on our platform, where organizations and individuals can create campaigns, and by using our free donate button on their own website. And Rob, there are no transaction fees, there are no setup fees, we're not selling any donor data. Our job is to just make online fundraising easy, meaningful, and really inexpensive to supersize generosity.
And we just implemented the Every.org button on our fundraising page to help us streamline all the different kinds of ways that people can give. So appreciate the services that Every.org provides nonprofits. So a couple of weeks ago, Every.org released the Relational Playbook, and this playbook shares a lot of great, insightful tips on how to transform donor engagement at your nonprofit into something that is long-term and sustainable. Allison, what are the main goals of the relational playbook? And would you also explain why you feel that its release now, during the challenges that nonprofits are experiencing, is particularly timely?
Yeah. So the playbook is an opportunity, Rob, to help nonprofits reset their everyday donations and donation programs. So for decades, nonprofits have been advised to basically treat all donors who give less than $500, we call those everyday donors, all the same, right? We get all the same direct mail, email, maybe some segmentation, but the idea is you push out solicitations and you ask, 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 ask. And donors don't like it. And we know that because there are about 20% fewer people giving to a cause today than they were in the year 2000. And we know that organizations are suffering in this model because they have something that I like to call the leaky bucket problem, right? And the leaky bucket problem is if you get 100 donors in year one, and it costs an awful lot of money to get those 100 donors, it's just say a 3% response on a solicitation, only 19 are going to make it to year two. You're going to lose on average 81 of those new donors. So that's the leaky bucket. And then organizations do it all over again every year because now you're in a panic because the bucket is so low, right? This is a really expensive and painful way to build a donor base. And there's an alternative, this relational playbook. It's relational fundraising at scale. The at scale part is what's new. And we'll talk about that in a second. The reason why the timing is so important is that we know that thousands of nonprofits have just lost federal funding and more will lose federal funding. They're naturally going to turn to everyday donors. And our hope is that they'll focus on this relational model to build the sustainable donor bases that they need to be around for the long term.
Yeah, it's really important for donors to help nonprofits during this challenging time when federal funding is at risk for so many charitable organizations. Allison, you mentioned scaling up. And one of the really interesting things about the relational playbook is that it talks about how to employ these strategies with small dollar donors. Can you explain a bit more about what it means to engage in relational fundraising at a larger scale and why the playbook had such a particular emphasis on these smaller dollar everyday donors?
It historically in the nonprofit sector, Rob, the largest number of donors are everyday donors, right? People who've been giving $25, $50, whatever they can. It's meaningful to them to give in those amounts. But over the last decade or so, we've seen an influx of very wealthy donors, particularly the billionaires, giving enormous sums to organizations, and they've turned their attention to major donors, a lot of organizations, and are not paying attention to everyday donors, which is why those, in part, why those retention rates are so low. Uh, Concentrating on large foundations or major donors puts organizations at huge risk. And again, this is what we're seeing right now of having so much relying on one donor, whether it's a government agency or a foundation or a billionaire, and then something changes and you've put your organization at huge risk. So it's a much safer and much more sustainable way to go to focus on making every single donor feel like $1 million. And that's what the playbook aims to do.
Very cool. And one of the other themes that is interwoven in the playbook is utilizing artificial intelligence to help be able to do these kinds of strategies at a larger scale. Obviously, AI is such a hot topic right now in fundraising. Um, can you talk through some of the tips that are provided in the playbook as far as using AI for more personalized methods of donor engagement?
So AI is essential to being able to make people feel welcome to organizations, make them feel like whole human beings, that we know their name, we know what they're interested in, we know what kinds of stories they respond to. But the first step, Rob, is to understand how to use AI responsibly, right? We don't want to layer AI onto that old transactional hamster wheel approach to fundraising, just supersize that model. We want to use AI in strategic ways to uh, help donors feel well thanked, right? There's a tool called Loom that can customize thank yous for donors, can tell organizations what donors respond to, what kinds of stories and when, and what kinds of appeals uh, fit their needs. But most importantly, Rob, what AI is really good at is sucking up administrative tasks that take 30% on average of staff time, right? If we don't have to spend time looking for messages, right? If the workflow is made easier, or reconciling budgets, or drafting communications from scratch, then we can take that new time, what I call the dividend of time, to pick up the phone and call donors, right? This isn't all just focused on AI. It is about turning our attention to be engaged with donors at every level.
Yeah, that's a great point, Allison. I know many nonprofits struggle with having just too many administrative and operational tasks on their plate, and many nonprofit staff, including fundraisers, are wearing multiple hats. So AI could be a really beneficial tool for a lot of folks. Um, that said, there is a really broad spectrum of comfort and familiarity with AI. So, what would you say to folks that might be a little hesitant on jumping in or wanting some guidance on where they might start in a sea of an ever-changing technological landscape?
It makes great sense, Rob, that people should be hesitant to jump in with AI. And AI is the most powerful set of tools that people have ever had at our everyday disposal. It's automating functions that only people could do until right now. So we need to think carefully about where and how do we want bots to do the work that we were doing until now. So for instance, it might be that your staff spends a lot of time every day responding to emails and calls with the same questions. When are you open? Is my gift to you tax deductible? And in that case, what I would call an exquisite pain point, thinking about using a chatbot to answer those questions would make good sense. Or it might be that staff spends a lot of time trying to create a first draft of a newsletter. That's hard to do. But with generative AI, that first draft takes literally seconds. So that might be a place to start. But I would strongly recommend that people go slowly. There is no rush to adopt AI. Think carefully about one pain point and try and experiment.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, that's great advice. And with something that changes as fast as AI, it's probably also helpful to understand that you're never going to be probably an expert in everything because it changes so fast. So just jumping in at a place that seems like a good place to start for you can be really helpful. And we've talked about AI. What other tips in the playbook, or is there a couple other ones that you point out that you think are really effective and helpful?
I think the most important thing is to pick up the phone and call everyday donors, Rob, and find out why they gave to your cause, how it felt to give to your cause. Not a question we ask very often. Are we making you feel joyful, or do you just feel like a data point in our system? And ask how they want to be involved. And this could just be 10 donors a month, 2 donors a week, even that you could call. But getting in the habit of asking questions of donors instead of telling them things and broadcasting messages is a good habit to start to get into. And then thinking about the ways that we might be able to connect donors to each other locally, maybe by zip code. Maybe donors want to create their own giving circle for your cause, or maybe they just want to have coffee because they have your cause in common. You don't have to facilitate all of those conversations. You could just make introductions. And the more social capital they build between one another, the more connected they will be to your cause.
So, Allison, we've talked about tips for nonprofit fundraisers, but what would you say to nonprofit leaders such as executive directors and board members? What can they do to really help provide that support so that fundraisers can be successful in relationship-based fundraising?
A fundamental shift in the approach to everyday giving is not going to be successful unless it has the full support of senior staff and board members. In the playbook, we talk about 3 steps for beginning to make this pivot from being transactional to being relational at scale. It begins with a shift in mindset, and that starts in the boardroom, right? Many organizations center their board meetings on looking at the financials and basically looking at cash in the door right now. That's why the transactional model seems to work for them, because it doesn't focus on the human cost of over soliciting donors and not engaging with them as human people, treating them like ATM machines. So at the board level, at the C-suite level, we've got to change the values that we're bringing to this, right? So number one value, and what we measure is what we value, right? Number one is switching from a cash in the door mindset to a donor retention mindset, right? Measuring and centering that data on how many donors are renewing to us. Are we getting donors to year 2? And how do donors feel about us? That changes how we do outreach to donors and who we value in our system. It might make experimenting with campaigns that focus on creating recurring donors, monthly donors, annual donors, important for the organization right now. But again, none of this happens until leadership really focuses on wanting to make every donor feel seen and heard, every donor feel a part of your community, welcomed in your organization, and change the conversations you're having about everyday donors inside the organizations.
Great point. Finally, Allison, before we sign off, where can folks learn more about every.org and where can they find the Relational Playbook to read more?
That's a great question, Rob, and the answer is actually in the name. Come to every.org. You can find the playbook on our blog. I hope that every organization will claim their profile on our platform, make it look welcoming, try it out with an experiment. We are here to help, and we want every organization to build a strong, robust, sustainable base of support.
Allison, thanks so much for joining me here to share your valuable insights and knowledge. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day.